high up on the jagged spine of the world, where the sky bled into shades of violet and emerald at dawn, nestled a village of domed, moss-covered homes built into the cliffs of a snow-drenched mountain. This was Zintra, a forgotten corner of the planet Varelia, where the air shimmered with cold magic and the wind sang through crystal spires that jutted from the peaks like frozen chimes. The villagers were tall, slender beings with skin like amethyst and hair like spun moonlight, living quietly in harmony with the whispering glaciers and ancient trees that glowed faintly at night. Among them lived a little girl named Lila, no taller than a human child of 6, with wide, luminous silver eyes and skin the deep purple of twilight grapes. Her white hair floated around her face like a halo caught in a breeze. Even when the wind was still, Lila loved to climb the ice stairs behind her home, where she'd sit and watch the twin suns dip behind the mountains, painting the snow in gold and rose. She believed the world was kind, that stars were watching eyes, and that kindness traveled on the wind like pollen. But one morning, the wind carried something else, fear. It began with silence. The usual hum of the village, the soft chime of wind bells, the laughter of children sliding down ice chutes. It all vanished. Lila woke to her mother's absence. Her warm sleeping pod was cold. Her mother's voice, which sang lullabies in a language older than the glaciers, was gone. Then came the tracks. Deep, heavy boot prints in the fresh snow, too large to belong to any Varelian. They led down the steep slope toward the frozen river, where the ice cracked like bones under pressure. Lila followed them, her tiny boots slipping on frost, her breath puffing in panicked bursts. And there, near the riverbank, she saw it. A dark, angular ship half buried in snow, its surface slick like oil, humming with a low, angry sound. Around it stood figures in black armor, their faces hidden behind reflective masks, dragging a struggling form in glowing restraints. It was her mother. Lila's heart stopped. She pressed her face into the snow to hide her glow. Varelians emitted a soft light when frightened, like fireflies startled at dusk. She watched, trembling, as her mother was pulled inside the ship. The hatch sealed with a hiss. The engines flared. And then, with a roar that shook the mountain, the ship tore into the sky, vanishing into the clouds like a nightmare dissolving in daylight. Lila didn't cry at first. She stood frozen, her small hands clutching the snow, her mind spinning like a broken compass. But then the grief came, hot and sharp, flooding her chest until she could barely breathe. She ran. Not back to the empty village, not to her silent home, but down the mountain, toward the lower slopes where the trees grew thicker and the snow turned to slush. She ran because she remembered something her mother once said. When our kind cannot help, sometimes the outsiders can. The lonely ones. The ones who listen. And so, through sobs and stumbles, Lila followed the old trail that wound down into the valley, where, according to legend, a human lived alone. The human's name was Torin. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a thick beard that looked like it had survived several winters on its own, and hands that were more calloused than skin. He wore layers of patched wool and leather, and his boots were held together by wire and hope. Torin hadn't always lived in the mountains. Once, he'd been part of a survey team from Earth, sent to map the outer rim planets. But when his ship crashed during a storm, killing everyone else, Torin survived. The Varelians found him half-frozen, babbling in a language they didn't understand, and brought him to their village. They healed him, fed him, taught him their ways. But Torin was not like them. He missed noise, music, coffee, sarcasm. He missed arguing about stupid things. After a year, he asked to leave. Not because he hated them, but because silence, no matter how peaceful, can become a kind of prison. So the elders helped him build a small cabin near the tree line, stocked with supplies, and left him to his solitude. For 7 years, Torin lived there, chopping wood, fixing his broken radio, growing stubborn potatoes in a greenhouse, and talking to a rubber duck he'd found in the wreckage, which he named Captain Quack. He wasn't sad, exactly, just still, like a stone in a river worn smooth by time. That morning, Torin was trying to teach Captain Quack how to fish. He sat on a frozen log by the stream, holding a bent rod, muttering, "See, Quack, the key is patience. You gotta let the fish think they're winning. Then bam! You yank." The duck, perched on a rock, stared blankly. Torin sighed. "You're a terrible student." Just then, a sound broke the stillness. Not the wind, not an animal. It was running, fast, desperate. He turned, squinting through the snowfall, and saw her. A small figure, purple-skinned, white-haired, stumbling through the drifts like a snow ghost. She was crying, her breath ragged, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw Torin, she didn't slow. She ran straight at him, arms outstretched, and crashed into his legs, sobbing in a language he didn't understand. Torin nearly fell over. Whoa! Hey, little one, it's okay. He dropped the fishing rod and knelt, his big hands hovering awkwardly. The girl clutched his coat, her small body shaking. Then, between gasps, she said something in broken, trembling common tongue, the language of the survey team. Please, follow me, human, my mother. They took her. Torin froze. He hadn't heard that language spoken in years. And now, a tiny alien child was begging for his help. He didn't hesitate. Something in her voice, in the way her tears froze on her cheeks, cut through the fog of his isolation. He grabbed his thick coat, slung a pack over his shoulder, filled with rope, a knife, a flare gun, and, of course, Captain Quack, and followed Lilla as she led him back up the mountain. The climb was brutal. The wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the snow came down in thick sheets. Torin slipped more than once, grunting as he caught himself on ice-covered rocks. Lilla, despite her size, moved with surprising speed, her small feet finding purchase where his boots flailed. You're like a mountain goat, he panted, and I'm like a walrus on roller skates. Lilla didn't laugh, but a tiny, watery smile flickered across her face. It was enough. As they climbed, Torin learned more. The ship had come from the sky, she said. It wasn't Varelian. It was Sky Snatchers, a name her people whispered in fear. They came every few generations, stealing the gifted ones, the healers, the singers of the old songs. Her mother was a star singer, one who could calm storms and speak to the glaciers. That's why they took her. Torin frowned. So this is like alien traffickers? Lilla nodded. They sell voices to rich ones on far planets. Torin whistled. Well, that's just rude. When they reached the riverbank, the ship was gone, but the damage remained. The snow was scorched in a wide circle. Strange metal fragments littered the ground, smoking faintly. Torin knelt, picking up a shard. It wasn't like any alloy he'd seen. Pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. This is bad, he muttered. Real bad. Lilla pointed to a set of tracks leading away from the crash site, larger, heavier, made by the kidnappers. Torin followed them, his jaw tight. The trail led into a narrow ravine, where the walls rose like frozen giants on either side. It was here that Torin noticed something strange. The snow wasn't just disturbed. It was melted in places, as if something hot had passed through. And then he saw the claw marks on the ice. Deep, three-pronged gouges, like something had dragged itself. Okay, he said, voice low. Either we're tracking kidnappers, or we're walking into a monster's den. Lilla grabbed his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. They are not alone, she whispered. The ship, it has watchers, like dogs, but made of metal and fire. Torin swallowed. Robotic guard dogs. Fantastic. I always wanted to be eaten by a toaster with teeth. They pressed on, the ravine narrowing until the sky was just a thin ribbon above. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and burnt sugar, a scent Torin remembered from the crash that killed his crew. His chest tightened. Memories flickered. Screams. Fire. The sound of metal screaming as it tore apart. He shook his head. Not now. A child needed him. Lilla suddenly stopped, her ears twitching. Varelians had no external ears, but their heads had delicate, fin-like ridges that sensed vibrations. Quiet, she breathed. Torin froze. From ahead, a low hum echoed through the ice. Then, a mechanical click. A shadow moved across the snow. Torin slowly reached into his pack and pulled out the flare gun. Stay behind me, he whispered. Lilla nodded, pressing close. Slowly, they crept forward. Around the bend, the ravine opened into a small cavern, half buried in snow. And there, resting on a platform of ice, was the ship. Smaller than he expected, shaped like a spiked beetle, its surface shifting colors like oil on water. Around it stood 3 machines, tall, spindly things with jointed legs and glowing red eyes, scanning the area with whirring heads. One of them turned, its lens focusing on a patch of disturbed snow. Torin held his breath. The machine stepped forward, its claws clicking on ice. Then, from the trees above, a branch snapped. The machine spun, firing a blue beam that melted a pine tree into bubbling sap. Torin cursed under his breath. We can't fight those things head-on. Lilla tugged his sleeve. She pointed to a fissure in the ice wall, a narrow crack, just wide enough to squeeze through. There, she whispered. I saw them take her in there. Torin peered at the crack. You mean we're gonna play squeeze the human through the alien dog door? Lila didn't smile, but her eyes sparkled. You are soft, but you can fit. Torin groaned. Rude. They approached the crack. Torin went first, wriggling like a worm in a boot. Ice scraped his back, snow fell down his collar, and at one point his belt got stuck. I look like a worm having a midlife crisis, he grunted. Finally, he popped through into a dimly lit tunnel carved from blue ice. Lila slipped through like smoke. The air inside was warmer, humming with energy. Strange symbols glowed on the walls. Varelian script mixed with harsh, angular markings Torin didn't recognize. This is their prison, Lila said softly, where they keep the stolen ones. Torin nodded, pulling out a small flashlight from his pack. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a series of cells made of shimmering energy fields. Inside one, a Varelian man sat curled up, his skin dim, his hair dull. In another, an elderly woman rocked back and forth, humming a broken tune. Torin's heart sank. How many have they taken? Lila's voice trembled. 12. My mother is the 13th. Torin clenched his fists. Not for long. They moved deeper into the tunnel, avoiding patrols of the spider-like machines. Torin used the flare gun to blind one that nearly caught them, shooting the flare into its lens. The machine shrieked and collapsed in a sparking heap. Score 1 for old Earth tech, Torin said, grinning. Lila stared at the smoldering robot. You are strange human, but good strange. Torin winked. I'll take that as a compliment. They reached a larger chamber, where the walls pulsed with green light. In the center stood a cage made of black crystal, suspended in midair by humming pillars. Inside, a Varelian woman knelt, her long white hair cascading around her, her purple skin glowing faintly. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved in silent song. Lila gasped. Mother! She ran forward, but Torin grabbed her arm. Wait, trap! As if on cue, the floor rumbled. From the shadows, 3 more machines emerged, their red eyes locking onto them. Behind them, a door hissed open, and a figure stepped out. It was tall, clad in a sleek black suit that shimmered like liquid. Its face was hidden behind a smooth, featureless mask, but its voice, when it spoke, was smooth and cold, like ice sliding over stone. You are not supposed to be here, human. This is not your world. This is not your fight. Torin stepped forward, placing himself between Lila and the figure. Yeah, well, I've never been great at minding my own business. The figure tilted its head. You are alone. Weak. You will die here, and the child with you. Torin smirked. Funny. I've been called a lot of things. Weak's not one of them. He reached into his pack and pulled out Captain Quack. The figure stared. Is that a toy? Torin grinned. No, this is Captain Quack. And he's seen some things. With a swift motion, he hurled the rubber duck at the figure's feet. The duck bounced, then exploded in a flash of light and smoke. Torin had rigged it with a flare charge and a small EMP from his old radio. The machines sparked and staggered, their lights flickering. The figure stumbled back, its mask cracked. What trickery is this? Torin didn't answer. He lunged, tackling the nearest machine and smashing its head into the wall. Lila darted past, running to the cage. Mother, I'm here. The Varelian woman opened her eyes. They shone like stars. She placed a hand on the crystal. Lila, you came. Her voice was soft, but it carried power. She began to sing, a low, resonant note that vibrated through the chamber. The ice walls trembled. The energy fields flickered. The machines screeched as their circuits overloaded. Torin grabbed Lila and pulled her back as the pillars supporting the cage cracked. With a thunderous crack, the black crystal shattered, and the woman fell into her daughter's arms. I knew you would come, she whispered. Torin wiped soot from his face. Well, she had good taste in heroes. The figure in black rose, its mask now shattered, revealing a pale, insect-like face with too many eyes. You cannot win, it hissed. The Star Singers will be ours. The galaxy hungers for their voices. Torin picked up a piece of broken machine leg and held it like a club. Yeah? Well, the galaxy can starve. These people are going home. Lila stood, her small hand in her mother's. Her silver eyes burned with determination. We are not yours, she said, her voice clear and strong. "And we are not afraid." Outside, the wind howled. The sky darkened as storm clouds gathered. The ship's engines whined, preparing for launch. But inside the chamber, something new was stirring. Not just courage, but unity. The freed prisoners began to sing, their voices weaving together in a harmony that made the ice glow. Torin looked around, amazed. "I don't know what's happening, but I like it." The mother stepped forward, her voice rising. The song grew louder, filling the tunnel, shaking the mountain. The machines collapsed, their lights dying. The figure in black screamed as the song reached its peak. A single, pure note that shattered the remaining walls and sent cracks racing up the ice. The ship groaned, its systems failing. Torin grabbed Lilla's hand. "Time to go!" They ran, the prisoners behind them, the song echoing like thunder. As they burst from the ravine, the entire cavern collapsed behind them in a roar of snow and ice. The ship exploded in a silent fireball, lighting the sky like a dying star. Back at the village, the Varelians emerged from hiding, their eyes wide with wonder. They surrounded Lilla and her mother, touching their foreheads in the old gesture of reunion. Torin stood back, hands in his pockets, feeling oddly out of place. Then Lilla ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You are our hero," she said. The elders approached, their voices solemn. "You have done what no Varelian could. You have broken the cycle. You are no longer just a stranger. You are family." Torin blinked, surprised. I don't know what to say." One elder smiled. "Say you'll stay for dinner. We have roasted glowmoss and fermented ice root tea." Torin laughed. "Now you're speaking my language." That night, under a sky full of swirling auroras, the village celebrated. Music filled the air, real music, not stolen, not sold, but free. Torin sat by the fire, Captain Quack propped beside him, sipping tea that tasted like cinnamon and lightning. Lilla curled up near him, half asleep. "Will you stay?" she murmured. Torin looked at the stars, then at the little girl with the white hair and purple skin. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I will." But far above, in the cold void of space, a signal pulsed from a distant ship, a message in a language of shadows. The hunt was not over. The Sky Snatchers would return. And when they did, Torin, Lilla, and the people of Zintra would be ready. As the seasons turned on Varelia, painting the snow-capped mountains in shifting hues of sapphire and rose, life in Zintra began to bloom anew. The air, once thick with fear, now carried laughter, song, and the soft chime of wind bells strung between domed homes. The villagers, long accustomed to silence and secrecy, now danced beneath the twin suns, their voices weaving through the valleys like threads of light. At the heart of it all was Lilla, no longer just a child of sorrow, but a symbol of courage. Her name whispered with pride in lullabies and legends alike. And beside her always was Torin. At first, he remained in his cabin by the tree line, pretending he was still the lone hermit who liked his solitude and his rubber duck. But the village had other plans. They brought him warm stew in clay bowls, taught him how to weave fire vines into blankets, and insisted he attend every festival, every storytelling night, every snowslip race down the ice chutes, which Torin always lost, usually by face-planting into a drift. Slowly, without realizing it, he stopped counting the days until he could leave. Instead, he began counting the moments that made him smile. The way Lilla would burst through his door at dawn, dragging him to see a new frozen waterfall, or how the elders now greeted him with a soft touch to the forehead, the Varelian sign of kinship. And then there was her mother. Her name was Morelia, though most called her Salen, the star singer. She moved like a breeze through the village, calm and luminous, her voice still carrying the power to still storms and soothe wounded animals. But with Torin, she was different. Not distant, not formal, but curious. She would sit with him by the fire, asking about Earth, about cities that touched the sky, about music that wasn't sung but made by machines, about something called pizza. He told her stories of thunderstorms and dogs and birthday parties with cake, and she would laugh, a sound like wind through crystal trees. One evening, as they watched the auroras swirl above the peaks, she said, "You carry loneliness like a second skin, but you don't wear it as heavily as you once did." Torin stared into the fire. "Maybe I found something worth staying for." She didn't answer, but her hand brushed his, just once, and the air between them seemed to hum. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like snow falling at night. A shared glance across the village square. A hand offered when the path was icy. A silent understanding when Lila fell ill with frost fever, and the two of them sat by her side for 3 days, taking turns singing Old Earth lullabies and Varelian healing chants until her fever broke. One morning, Torin woke to find a woven bracelet of glowing moss on his doorstep, delicate, warm to the touch, shaped like a spiral. He knew who left it. That night, he brought her a small wooden carving he'd spent weeks making, a figure of a Varelian woman standing beneath a starry sky. She held it for a long time, then placed it on the shelf beside her sleeping pod, where it caught the morning light. They never spoke of love, not in words, but the village saw. The elders exchanged knowing glances. Children giggled when Torin and Morelia walked together to the high meadow, where she taught him to listen to the glacier's slow song. Lila beamed, skipping between them, holding both their hands. "You're like a family," she declared one day, as if announcing a great discovery. Torin choked on his tea. Morelia smiled, her silver eyes soft. "Yes," she said, "we are. But peace, like ice on a warm spring river, is never as solid as it seems." It began with a shadow in the sky. Torin saw it first. A flicker at the edge of the atmosphere, too fast to be a bird, too silent to be wind. He was chopping wood behind his cabin when he felt it. A deep, unnatural vibration in the ground, like a heartbeat from beneath the mountain. He froze, axe in hand. Then came the smell, ozone and burnt sugar, the same scent that had haunted him since the crash. His blood turned cold. Not again. That night, he climbed to the high watchstone, where the air was thin and the stars blazed like diamonds. He pulled out the salvage scanner from his old survey gear, patched together with Varelian crystals. The screen flickered, then lit up with a single blip, small but moving in a slow, deliberate orbit. Not a meteor, not a satellite, a ship, and it was scanning the mountain. He told no one at first, not even Morelia. He didn't want to scare her, didn't want to break the fragile peace they'd built. But Lila noticed. "You're worried," she said one evening, tugging at his sleeve. "Like before." Torin sighed. "Maybe, but we don't know for sure." Lila tilted her head, her fin ridges twitching. "I hear them in my dreams. The sky snatchers. They whisper. They say, voices are coming back." Torin's stomach dropped. He went to Morelia. She listened in silence, her face unreadable. When he finished, she walked to the window and looked up at the stars. "They will come," she said. "They always do. But this time we are not helpless." She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You taught us that." Together they began to prepare. Torin, with his knowledge of human tech and tactics, worked with the village elders to fortify Zintra. They rigged the windbells with sonic disruptors that could shatter glass or robot circuits. They buried EMP charges along the lower trails, powered by geothermal vents. The children were taught to hide in the ice caves, the elders to sing in unison, a harmonic frequency that could disable alien tech. Morelia trained Torin in the ways of the star singers, teaching him to focus his voice, to channel emotion into sound. "Your heart is your weapon," she said, "not just your hands." He laughed. "Never thought I'd become a singing warrior." She kissed his cheek. "You are many things, Torin. Warrior, teacher, father." He didn't cry, but his eyes were very wet. The day the ship descended, the sky turned the color of bruises. It came at dawn, a jagged, obsidian vessel that split the clouds like a knife. It didn't land. It hovered, suspended above the valley, its underbelly opening like a dark mouth. From it poured not just machines, but something worse. Hunters in sleek armor, their faces hidden, their movements precise. They carried devices that silenced song, that drained light from the air. The village alarms rang, deep, resonant chimes that echoed through the mountains. People ran to their stations. Torin grabbed his pack, his flare gun, and Captain Quack, who now had a tiny helmet made of scrap metal. Lila stood beside him, holding a small sonic whistle Morelia had given her. "I'm not running," she said firmly. Torin knelt. "You don't have to, but you stay behind me. Promise." She nodded. The battle began with sound. Morelia stepped forward, her arms raised, and sang. Not a lullaby, not a prayer, a war song. Her voice cracked the sky, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. The hunters staggered, their devices sparking. The machines shrieked as their circuits fried. Torin fired the flare gun into the swarm, creating chaos. Villagers emerged from hiding, singing in harmony, their voices weaving into a shield of sound that repelled the invaders. Lilla blew her whistle, a high, piercing tone that shattered the lenses of 3 approaching drones. But the hunters adapted. From the ship, a new machine emerged, a massive, spider-like construct with a core that absorbed sound, feeding on the singer's energy. It advanced toward Morelia, its limbs crushing ice and stone. Torin shouted, firing flare after flare, but the creature absorbed the blasts. Morelia's voice began to falter. The machine was draining her. Without thinking, Torin ran. He dodged claws and beams, rolled under mechanical legs, and climbed onto the beast's back. He pulled out the last charge from his pack, a fusion of Varelian crystal and earth tech, unstable, dangerous. "Hope this works," he muttered. He jammed it into the core. The machine thrashed, screeching. Torin leapt, just as it exploded in a silent burst of light, knocking him into the snow. He woke to Lilla's face above him, tears in her silver eyes. "You're alive! You're alive!" he groaned. "Barely. Tell Captain Quack I said goodbye." Morelia knelt beside him, her hands glowing as she channeled healing energy. "You reckless, brave, wonderful man," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "Only for you." The ship, damaged and leaderless, retreated, vanishing into the clouds. The village stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, they began to sing. Not in fear, not in sorrow, but in triumph. In the days that followed, Torin and Morelia stood together on the high ridge, watching the sun set behind the peaks. Lilla played below, teaching the other children how to use their whistles. "They'll come back," Torin said. Morelia nodded. "And we'll be ready." He took her hand. "We're not just defending our home, we're protecting our family." She leaned into him. "Then let them come. The mountain remembers. The stars watch. And we sing." The mountain village of Zintra never forgot the day the Sky Snatchers fell. Songs were composed about the human with the wild beard and the rubber duck who fought with fire and song. Children danced in reed circles, mimicking Torin's clumsy charge against the sound-eating machine, while elders spoke of the star singer, whose voice had shaken the stars, and the little girl who had brought a stranger into their hearts. But as the seasons cycled and peace settled like fresh snow, Torin, Morelia, and Lilla began to dream of something quieter, something just for them. They knew the hunters would return. The signal had pulsed again, faint but undeniable, like a heartbeat from the void. The village prepared, reinforcing defenses, training new singers, mapping escape routes into the deep ice caves. But Torin and Morelia looked at each other one evening, their hands entwined by the fire, and knew they wanted more than survival. They wanted life, not just safety, but mornings without fear, laughter that wasn't followed by silence. A home where Lilla could grow up chasing butterflies instead of shadows. So they made a choice. With the blessing of the elders, they left. Not in secret, not in shame, but in celebration. On the morning of the first thaw, when the glaciers began to sing their melting song and the wind carried the scent of blooming frost lilies, the entire village gathered at the edge of the high meadow. Torin stood in a robe woven from silver moss and mountain wool, his beard freshly braided with tiny glowing beads, a Varelian sign of belonging. Morelia wore a gown of living crystal threads that shimmered with every breath, her white hair flowing like a river of light. Lilla, in a tiny dress stitched with star patterns, held a bouquet of ice blooms, her silver eyes shining with pride. The ceremony was not like earth weddings, nor like Varelian rites of old. It was something new, something theirs. The elders sang a harmony of welcome, while Torin recited a poem he'd written on a scrap of metal, about mountains and second chances. Morelia responded in the old tongue, her voice weaving promises into the air like threads of light. And when the final note faded, Lilla stepped forward and placed a hand on each of their hearts. "Now," she said, "you are my parents, not just in blood, but in song, in fire, in everything." There were tears. There was laughter. Captain Quack, wearing a tiny flower crown, was passed from villager to villager like a sacred relic. Then, with packs on their backs and a small sled pulled by 2 sturdy snow lizards gifted by the elders, they began their journey, not up the mountain, but through it, through hidden tunnels known only to the oldest guides, across frozen rivers that hummed beneath their feet, into the uncharted southern valleys where the snow gave way to emerald forests and warm springs steamed beneath starlight. It took weeks. There were storms, missteps, moments when Torin muttered about missing indoor plumbing. But Morelia would sing, and the wind would calm. Lilla would point at a glowing bird or a tree with leaves like glass, and suddenly the hardship would fade. At last they found it. A hidden valley, cradled between two ancient peaks, untouched by hunters or time. A crystal-clear lake reflected the twin suns. Meadows of soft blue grass rolled toward a grove of singing trees, Varelian flora that resonated with emotion, chiming gently in the breeze. A small waterfall poured into a pool, where fish with translucent fins darted like living light. And there, on a gentle slope, they built their home. It wasn't grand. It was made of sun-baked stone, curved wood, and panels of recycled ship metal that Torin had salvaged years ago. The roof was thick with moss, and the windows were made of polished ice that never frosted. Inside, it was warm and cluttered and alive. A kitchen with a real stove, Torin's pride and joy, shelves filled with books, carvings, and Captain Quack's personal throne, a repurposed gearbox. A music room where Morelia taught Lilla the old songs and Torin attempted to play a stringed instrument that sounded like a cat in a wind tunnel. A garden where earth potatoes grew beside Varelian glow tubers, and where Lilla planted seeds from both worlds in neat little rows. They were a family now, not by accident, not by survival, but by choice. Mornings began with the smell of roasted root tea and Torin's terrible singing as he fried something questionable in a pan. Lilla would burst in, already chattering about a dream she'd had or a new creature she'd seen in the woods. Morelia would smile, her voice soft as she reminded them to slow down, to breathe, to listen. To the trees, to each other, to the quiet magic of simply being together. Torin learned to cook without burning everything. Morelia learned to laugh at bad jokes. Lilla grew taller, her voice stronger, her courage unshakable. She still had nightmares sometimes, of ships in the sky, of cold hands grabbing. But now she woke to the sound of her mother singing, or her father snoring like a bear with a stuffy nose. And she knew she was safe. They weren't completely cut off. Once a year, a caravan from Zintra made the journey, bringing news, gifts, and updates from the stars. The Sky Snatchers had been spotted near other systems, but Zintra remained hidden, protected by song and silence. The elders sent letters written in glowing ink. We remember you. We honor you. The mountain watches over your valley. And it did. Sometimes, on clear nights, Torin and Morelia would sit outside, wrapped in furs, watching the auroras dance. Lilla would fall asleep between them, her head on Torin's lap, her small hand in her mother's. Do you ever miss Earth? Morelia asked one night. Torin thought for a long time. I did. But home isn't a place. It's people. And I found mine. She leaned into him. Then we stay. Here. Together. He kissed her forehead. Forever, if the universe allows. And though the stars still held dangers, though the hunters still prowled the dark, in that quiet valley, surrounded by singing trees and a lake that mirrored the sky, one truth rang clearer than any alarm, stronger than any weapon. They were not just surviving. They were living, and they were loved.